Hey YouTube, here is the rest of Chapter 6 and Chapter 7 from the Fundamental 5, the Formula for Quality Instruction. Chapter 6, continuing where we left off. A teacher can teach what he or she has always taught in the manner he or she has always taught it, and simply by adding effective, meaningful, and significant recognition and reinforcement, individual student achievement and overall classroom performance can increase significantly. One teacher, when realizing the enormity of this gain, stated eloquently, "I may have been born at night, but I wasn't born last night. I would be crazy not to get better at this." For your consideration, there are some adults who believe that the use of extrinsic rewards actually reduces the student's desire to work for the love of learning. For those adults, the authors point out that research consistently shows that the purposeful use of extrinsic rewards to change behaviors leads to the behavior changing used by the learner to satisfy intrinsic motivations. Other adults believe that engaging in a task for an extrinsic reward either cheapens the task or represents some form of bribery. For those adults, the authors simply ask, "Do you love your job? If so, do you do it for free?" Great teachers realize that students are motivated to work for a variety of reasons and work to identify and provide those motivators. Chapter 7, Writing Critically. Critical writing, defined as writing for the purpose of organizing, clarifying, defending, refuting, analyzing, dissecting, connecting and or expanding on ideas or concepts, is currently the least frequently used of the 5 practices that the authors have identified to be fundamental to effective instruction. In his book, Results Now, 2006, Mike Schmoker documents that based on a study of 1,500 classroom observations, the number of classrooms in which students were either writing or using rubrics was 0%. For those who doubt the validity of this observation, the authors sympathize, as they also were initially skeptical. But their own analysis of the data from hundreds of initial classroom observations has yielded similar results. The bottom line is that when it comes to writing critically in the classroom, teachers do not have students do enough of it. Based in part on discussions with educators from all grade levels and all content areas and their own experiences in the classrooms, it is the author's opinion that this lack of critical writing is primarily due to teachers' misconceptions of what constitutes critical writing. Many teachers seem to operate under the misconception that critical writing is a function of weight. By weight, it is meant that the teachers believe that a critical writing exercise requires numerous pages, numerous footnotes, numerous revisions. Alternatively, some teachers seem to believe that a critical writing assignment must take a significant amount of time and must culminate in a perfectly spelled, typed, and ready for publication student product. Other teachers believe that critical writing is a responsibility of the English language arts and writing teachers, or that writing critically does not fit into their content area. Though the reader may feel as if there is some overgeneralization in the preceding descriptions, the authors ask for some leeway in order to illustrate their point. Given the way that most teachers seem to view critical writing, is it any wonder why it is observed infrequently in classrooms? By focusing on the end product, teachers misunderstand the power of the process of writing critically. Everything we write is a potential learning experience. Writing is a systematic process for learning essential meanings. Paul and Elder, 2007. The process of writing critically requires the learner to take a subconscious idea, expand on that idea, connect it to other subconscious ideas, and bring that to the conscious level through the tangible act of writing. To gain knowledge, we must construct in our minds. Writing what we are trying to internalize helps us achieve that purpose. When we are able to make connections in writing, we begin to take ownership of these connections. To do this, we must learn how to identify core ideas and then explain those ideas in writing. When one views critical writing as a process as opposed to an end product, then the time spent, weight, and perfection are no longer critical variables. Putting focused thought on paper is the important element. Through this lens, critical writing can take on many forms. A critical writing exercise can consist of a simple list, a short comparison paragraph, a quick summary, a mind map, purposeful note-taking, a written exit ticket, or even a formal essay or term paper. It must be noted that critical writing is not copying, a popular instructional activity that essentially transforms entire classrooms into slow-speed Xerox machines. Neither is critical writing a fill-in-the-blank activity or free writing. Without debating the merits of these activities, the reader is reminded to focus on the key term, critical, which indicates the intent to distill abstract thoughts into concrete understandings. The raw power of critical writing. The authors cannot overemphasize the power of critical writing. Consider 3 instructional practices addressed in the book, Classroom Instruction That Works, Marzano, 2001. Identifying similarities and differences, summarization, and note-taking. These 3 practices represent the pinnacle of effective instruction identified in the book, and all 3 can be accomplished through a well-designed critical writing exercise. Given the research, the critical writing activity of identifying similarities and differences can increase student performance from 31 to 46 percentile points. For summarization, student performance gains can range between 23 and 47 percentile points. And note-taking can produce a corresponding student performance gain of between 13 and 44 percentile points. With the current focus on school accountability, the incentive to increase the amount of critical writing in the classroom in order to realize those gains in student achievement should not be in question. Clearly, critical writing is essential for academic improvement. However, raw numbers and campus accountability scores do not tell the whole story. Writing critically has a dramatic impact on the individual student. Students who think critically use writing as an important tool both for communicating important ideas and for learning, to deepen their understanding of important concepts and to clarify interrelationships between concepts. They use writing as an important tool for learning ideas deeply and permanently. Paul and Elder, 2006. The act of writing critically encapsulates the learning. It forces the learner to refine and distill a concept or idea to its critical message, and in many cases, connect that critical message to other critical message. It allows the learner to improve retention through the process whereby long-term memory preserves a learning in such a way that it can locate, identify, and retrieve it accurately in the future. Sousa, 2001. Writing critically increases both the amount of material that can be recalled by the learner and the speed at which it can be recalled. When a student can remember more content and process that content more efficiently, the student has a greater likelihood of enjoying success in the classroom. In terms of direct benefit to the student, writing critically on a regular basis increases overall literacy skills. The process of reading and writing are so entwined that from a cognitive standpoint, they are essentially the same skill. There is an intimate relationship between reading and writing well. Any significant deficiency in reading entails a parallel deficiency in writing. Any significant deficiency in writing entails a parallel deficiency in reading. Paul and Elder, 2006. This is valuable instructional information because the research indicates that the key to increasing literacy skills is to increase the amount of time spent on literacy activities, and that would mean converting current amounts of time and hard work from unproductive stuff to literacy activities that would be far more meaningful to both students and teachers. Schmoker, 2006. This helps to explain the emphasis and, in many cases, directives from district campus leadership for teachers to embed reading and critical writing in all content areas. However, given both curricular pacing constraints and teacher skill sets, directing someone to include these activities in the classroom and having it actually occur are 2 different things. Where reading represents a significant investment in classroom time and requires an enhanced instructional skill set to support students who have difficulty reading, writing is easier for teachers to support and modify to fit the activities scheduled in the class. Based on a better understanding of the components of literacy, reading and writing, when students write about what they have learned in a given class and do this in all classes, each student has had the time devoted to improving his or her literacy skills significantly increased. As students increase their literacy ability, the options available to them, both short-term and long-term, are also increased and improved. While this is beneficial for high-achieving students, it has the potential to be life-changing for low-achieving students, when one considers that the reading requirements for many entry-level blue-collar jobs are similar to the reading requirements for the freshman year of college. See chart below. To not embed literacy opportunities in every class represents a significant disservice to all students. And here is the table. Okay. After that table, we have a confession. Both authors were classroom teachers. Kane taught math and Laird taught social studies. When the early emphasis on reading and writing across the content areas came into vogue, both received the directive to increase the amount of reading and writing in their classrooms, and both continued to teach as they had always taught. The reason, no one told them or showed them how this was to be accomplished, and it was not part of their evaluation. When both authors were principals, they repeated the cycle, directing teachers to increase the amount of reading and writing in every class, yet still providing no meaningful classroom support or effective teacher training. They did, however, wring their hands when they observed no change in classroom practices as their principals had done years before. The sharing of their current understanding that writing and reading are inseparable and providing ways to embed more literacy in the classroom is their way to support current teachers and administrators to close the knowing/doing gap that existed in their classrooms and on their campuses. Rigor and relevance. After years of experiencing teaching in the classroom, leading schools and leading school systems, coupled with literally thousands of classroom observations representing all grade levels and content areas, the authors are of the firm opinion that most attempts by teachers to add instructional rigor in the classroom are, first and foremost, much less frequent than most educators believe, and second, are contrived, poorly executed, and or overly orchestrated. The reader should understand that this is not meant as an indictment. In fact, it is a testament to the difficulty of the task. Fortunately, there is a simple solution, and critical writing provides it. Critical writing activity allows the teacher to stretch the rigor of any lesson, maintain the higher level of rigor for an extended period of time, and do so in a natural and authentic fashion. Consider the following critical writing exercise. If one was teaching a class about the fundamental 5, at this point in the discussion, the teacher could ask the students to quickly create a list of the fundamental 5 practices of effective instruction. Frame the lesson, work in the power zone, frequent small group purposeful talk about the learning, recognize, reinforce, and write critically. This would represent rigor at the knowledge level of Bloom's taxonomy. From that list, the teacher could then have the students indicate which of the fundamental 5 practices they deem to be the most important. This would represent rigor at the analysis level of Bloom's taxonomy. The teacher could then have the students defend their selection of the most important fundamental 5 practice. This represents rigor at the evaluation level of Bloom's taxonomy. Finally, the teacher could have the student read and discuss their argument in frequent small group purposeful talk, extending the length of time that students are operating at higher levels of cognition. This type of critical writing activity, which is appropriate in almost any instructional setting, quickly drives classroom rigor to the evaluation level of Bloom's taxonomy and keeps it there for a period of time. The beauty of this particular activity is that it can be completed in as little as 10 minutes. Though 10 minutes of instructional time is a precious commodity, if writing critically at the higher levels of Bloom's taxonomy replaces an instructional activity of lower rigor, the trade-off would seemingly benefit both the student and the teacher. The introduction of critical writing activities in the classroom also provides the opportunity to increase the level of relevance for the students. The reader will recall from the discussion in Chapter 3, Framing the Lesson, that relevance is increased when the concept or skill being taught is connected to other parts of the student's world. When students write critically, they often connect the concept being addressed to other concepts that they are familiar with from both academic and non-academic settings. This occurs even with writing prompts that are related directly to the content area. With the selection of a correct writing prompt, the teacher can specifically manage student-developed relevance as opposed to relying on teacher-driven relevance. An example of teacher-driven relevance is when the teacher attempts to increase the relevance of a lesson by pointing out to the class, "This is how you could use this skill in the real world." Relevance presented this way is the equivalent of an interesting factoid such as, "Baking soda can also be used as a toothpaste substitute." This may be an interesting fact, but it is one that will be promptly forgotten by all but the most trivia-inclined student. On the other hand, the teacher who represents a concept and then instructs students to write down what other uses for baking soda of which you are aware, positions the student to connect on his or her own the presented concept to other areas of his or her world. This is important because when the student makes the extended relevance connection in a way that makes sense to him or her, the use of the knowledge has extended beyond the status of mere factoid. Through the act of critical writing, the teacher has increased the probability that the content is owned by the student. Formative assessment. Critical writing provides the student and the teacher with an excellent source of formative assessment material. Information is formative when the teacher and student adjust their actions based on what the information reveals. During the critical writing activity, the student is able to identify gaps in his or her learning, questions he or she wants to ask, and or insights he or she has developed. This positions the student to engage with the teacher and the class in ways that better meet his or her interests and needs. By reviewing the critical writing sample, the teacher can quickly assess the level of student understanding and quickly establish if the student is making appropriate and meaningful connections between new content and prior content. Based on that assessment, the teacher makes purposeful adjustments to his or her instruction. For example, speeding up, slowing down, reviewing, regrouping, and providing individual support. The critical writing activity is always assessed, but it does not have to be formally assessed each and every time. Simply put, this means that a grade does not have to be entered every time the student puts pen to paper. However, some attention must be paid to the student's writing. There must be a level of accountability for engaging in critical thought. That accountability can be provided through teacher observation, discussion, peer review, self-assessment, the use of a rubric, or any other number of ways, including an actual grade. If students begin to realize that there is no check for understanding or accountability for their critical writing, all but the most motivated students will quickly lose interest, and the critical element of the writing will all but evaporate. And here is a sample rubric student assessment of critical writing. They've got categories, presentation of topics, supporting information, organization, understanding, and a point system with a total amount of points for the rubric at the bottom. Natural closing product. Finally, as many teachers have realized and the authors recommend, a short critical writing exercise can serve as an excellent closing product for the lesson frame. Fundamental practice number 1, frame the lesson. As the closing product of the day's lesson, a trainer working with a group of teachers could provide a writing prompt similar to the following. I will answer the following questions. What obstacles might I have to overcome to implement the Fundamental 5 in my classroom? In less than 5 minutes, this question could be answered on a 3x5-inch index card, and the teachers could hand the card to the trainer as they exit the training room. With this critical writing activity, the rigor level of the instruction is increased to the analysis level, and relevance is increased as the teacher considers how he or she will personally overcome the obstacles that may arise as he or she attempts to apply what was learned in a different setting. In addition, with a quick scan of the cards, The trainer can determine the general level of understanding of a lesson for the group as a whole, as well as for individual participants. This determination then assists the trainer in planning the activities for the next training session. This is the very definition of quality, proactive instruction.